oftentimes it's both passive-aggressive notes at points, because again, this is your home of the future, right? It's you, and you make all the decisions in exactly what the layout of this place is, right? So in contrast, here's a big cooperative house with 15 of us all navigating each other's different behaviors and relationships, and there are no cameras. Like we've floated the idea many times of like, who's not doing their dishes? One person, there's invariably one person who's not doing dishes. We're not doing them to the same level. And somebody will joke about putting a camera near the sink, and we all recoil at the thought of documenting ourselves in that way that could lead to sort of negative ramifications instead of positive, like in this sense here.
There's a famous repeated experiment that might help you in this regard. This was done at workplaces where you have a coffee urn. You pour yourself coffee. If you put a sign up that says coffee donation 25 cents, and then you count it up at the end of the week, you might not have enough for another pound of coffee, right? Meaning some people don't give.
Yeah.
But if you put the sign up, coffee donations 25 cents, with a pair of eyes behind it, a photograph of a pair of eyes, you'll get more donations at the end of the week. And you'll get even more if you put coffee 15 cents with a mirror behind it, where now they're looking at themselves. You'll get even more donations.
Wow.
So you might want to put a mirror up and then put that sign on a mirror and see if it works.
Look at yourself.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. That's actually that's actually the best idea I've heard in a while. Well, thank you for that.
There you go. Let's talk privacy for a second, because this raises some of these concerns. I was saying before, I think there's an efficiency to some of these signs, because there's always, I think, from my outsider-insider perspective, been sort of core, I've spoken of generations of them. There was that first wave with the answering machine era. Then there was the period like with Fred Bacher, Terry Klein, Jody LaFond, etc., Hallwall's folks, Janet Lundeen, me.
You've been in touch with her?
Yes, I will.
How long ago?
Oh, not recently. So don't tell me this on YouTube, because this is going to lead us to privacy in a second.
Okay, because I was going to tell you.
Well, don't tell me yet, but tell me after.
My jaw hit the ground.
Yeah. Oh, well, don't tell me yet.
Why, you think she'll feel betrayed?
Possibly. But also I'm heading... Oh, yeah, exactly. I'm heading into several privacy things. Okay. But anyway, so then there's the Greg Sterlace and Company era, in which you started doing just lots of video shows and movies and, just all like a whole new wave of people. And in each case, there are regulars, but then even from the beginning, you said people bring friends of friends and all that. So you're very used to having people enter your space that you don't know and that you're not watching at all times. So does that...
it hasn't caused any problems.
Well, no. Well, yeah, but you a lot of what you've done has bridged the gap between... I mean, we talked about the future part of the home of the future, but there's the home of the future part as well, which is, you talked about how you had to stop one project because you were getting, harassing phone calls to someone who essentially was a fictional character, a real person playing a fiction. So there was that.
Are you asking me, do I ever feel like I have a boundary of privacy that somehow has been crossed? Has it ever been crossed, or?
No, because I was going to say, I think you used to have, at least, I'm sure you still do, very clear boundaries. Like when we set up this interview, you said, go to this website and these are my available dates.
Right.
It used to be there was some specific time, like I'll say 9:32 or something, that we had to be done, and pretty much every project ended. So you've always had these kinds of boundaries, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts about privacy.
I think that if we're going to move forward as a human species, we shouldn't do what T.S. Eliot said, prepare a face for the faces that we meet. I think we should have on our real face. So the answer to your question is, I'm in favor of as little privacy as possible. And boy, has that gotten me in trouble over the decades. Like I was just about to tell you about the letter I got from Janet.
Yeah.
Which I'll be happy to do, by the way, because I still haven't learned my lesson.
Right.
And mainly because I just feel I don't want to be part of the culture of preparing a face to meet the faces that you meet. I don't want to be part of that culture. That's where I'm an outsider. That's one of the reasons that I'm an outsider.
Well, I think there are the ways in which, like, there are a lot of reasons that people have, I call that the mask, you know, and absolutely, like, some people can put on the mask easier than others, you know, and I can put on the mask and not feel that I'm losing my true self. But if there's situations that I have to negotiate where I don't feel safe being my true self, or if my true self is someone like, for example, you know, at the Burchfield Penney Art Center, I'm actually super lucky that I work with a bunch of people who accept me for how goofy I am, you know, and this one too, you know. But then we.
You mean he accepts you, or he's goofy like you?
Both.
Yeah, I was wondering which.
Yeah, both. Yeah. You're both goofy like me, and you accept me, and I know that. I know that fully.
Of course.
But it extends beyond, you know, my eclectic coworker to pretty much the whole staff. But then there's other situations when navigating with the public or giving tours or doing stuff like that, where absolutely I'm like, I am a public face, you know. But that's also how I get through these situations. And one of my partners has a very difficult time with that. He's somebody who both has no idea of what his face looks like to other people, but also the way his face might be interpreted by other people is not necessarily a reflection of how he's actually feeling. But he's a very genuine person who doesn't know how to process even the concept of the face, you know, the public face.
I went to a Hall Walls art opening once, and I was riding home with Janet, the same person we were talking about here, and she said, I am so exhausted. And I said, well, we were just basically standing around talking to people. I said, you mean you're tired from being on your feet? And she says, no, not that at all. She says, you have no idea how hard it is being me. I thought that was very thought-provoking.
Well, that's the classic definition of an introvert, is a person who's exhausted by interactions with other people. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? Ambivert? Or?
I don't know. I never really gave it much thought. But what does it mean to be exhausted being you? It's like you're putting on a performance. Like I could see an actor saying that. I'm exhausted after performing
as myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but see, I can identify with that very clearly. I get totally wiped out after being, you know, at a party or something like that. And it's an introvert. It's a classic quality. And I don't think that it's about putting on a false self. It's hard to explain.
Well, that made me wonder if we have two selves.
Well, I think we have multiple. I mean, like not two. Why are you limiting yourself to two?
Just for the example.
Oh.
There's the art opening self.
Yeah.
And then there's the away from the art opening self. But how hard would it be to live our lives with oneself?
I don't think that we are oneself.
I think you're being disingenuous here, Richard, because everyone who sees snap judgments these days, or lots of photographs of you, you know, with you in the photograph and someone else says, that guy's expression never changes. And you once related that, you have an answer to that that relates to Civil War photography, if I may jog your memory there. Do you know what I'm referring to?
I do like Civil War photography. There's no question about that. But I usually explain it this way. I'm including the viewer.
But you are performing.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's look at it from the point of view of performance. There's a line by Alexander Pushkin. Your face is a map of the tears you have not shed. All right? Now, when I'm taking somebody's picture, either self-portrait or this way, I don't say, smile. And the reason that I don't say that is because I want to give them the power to represent their interior state however they want. All right? If they want to represent it as smiling, let them represent it smiling. But I'm going to keep taking more and more pictures until they stop representing, because I know in a group of maybe 50 pictures, I'm going to get one where they're not representing their interior state intentionally. And that is when I will capture their interior state, when they're not worried about representing it. Okay, that's not too...
No, but what I'm saying is...
Now, let's talk about myself here, right? Yeah. Okay. If I'm standing in front of a camera, right, my goal is to relate to the camera in a way so that I'm not trying to represent my interior state. I want to see if people can, when I look at the photo and it's all done, I want to see if I can see the tears that I have not shed. See, I want to live that line from Pushkin. So I guess you could say, you know, that it is a performance, but I tend to look at it as like a non-performance. It's letting my expression go to zero.
But not giving people perhaps other contexts to take that one representation within. For example, I've seen a number of the snap judgments. And it is true, you know, your face is very blank in those videos, in a way that made it very difficult for me to get a sense of you, you know. And then I walked in here tonight, and even though in passing, I saw you in a room once before years ago, or maybe even just, yeah, it was probably within the last year. And I walk in, and you had a big smile for me, and your eyes were very warm. And granted, I was bringing someone who is a, you know, old friend of yours, or rather brought me, I should say. But I was actually taken aback by it because I was not expecting.
You thought I might be colder.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely did. And so it's still like, so, you know, I don't think that there's any one self, but one of my favorite concepts is the hidden 30%, I call it, which is the part of you, or the part of me, I guess I'll speak for, because I'll speak for myself, but the hidden 30% is the part that most people don't see, that perhaps my intimate relationships see, people I'm in intimate relationships with see, but also my family and my housemates, you know, but these hidden parts of me that are not they're not even just what a lot of people think are part of me, you know, and I think we all have that hidden 30%, the weird stuff we do in our most trusted state, you know, with our most trusted people. And that's always really fascinating to me. It's also things you can't unknow about people, you know.
I've never heard of this concept, the hidden 30%.
I made it, you know, I made it up.
It's a good one.
I made it up.
I like it.
Thanks.
Do you have a hidden 30%?
Sure, at least 30.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, unlike, I'm thinking as you're each talking about your experience, you live with, 14 other people? Yeah. And you live alone, but in a sea of other people who flow in and out of that.
Yeah.
I'm very different because I live with one other person, and before that, well, I'd have housemates or just live by myself. I never wanted to live in a group situation more than like one housemate at a time. And I guess if I were going to veer toward either, it would be more toward the Richard, side of things. But I like having those, kind of very set boundaries. Like one of the nice things about living in Tonawanda is that no one drops in on me. When I lived on the west side of Buffalo, I would have people, like you were saying here, people would people would pop in all the time unannounced. And I've, in my elder years, not as crazy about that. Like the privacy, I think that 30% I'm very guarded about. Yeah. It's very precious to me. Yeah. And yet, at the same time, I will make art in which I talk about all kinds of things that other people, might choose not to, make art about or tell stories about or whatever.
But you're making that choice.
Yeah, exactly.
You're making that choice for yourself and your lived experiences.
Right.
Which is one of the things for me, like for example, privacy. Not even privacy within a digital technological context, but yes, just how do you you have one perspective of wanting to live in a state where we are all both our true selves and unguarded. But there are lots of reasons that people are guarded. And there are lots of reasons that I know are not my lived experiences, but influence other people's decisions and why they engage the way they engage, and like all the shit that I know that I don't know,
Wait a minute, you lost me there.
Well, it's actually a Rumsfeld quote. It's one of the most...
Oh, right. Yeah.
I know. Zizek is very popular about referencing that.
Yeah.
But how are you using it?
There's known knowns and there's known unknowns and then there's unknown unknowns. For example, if somebody is wearing a mask in a situation with me, I know that I don't know...
Like if you've never met this person?
No, if I'm even engaging with them. If somebody... I'm just with the concept of why people might be guarded or why people might want to protect their privacy, that they have their reasons that I know that I don't know and I don't necessarily need to know unless
So your gut tells you the person isn't you're not talking to the real them, but you're okay with that.
And it's not my place to say how much of themselves they share with me. It's their place to say how much of themselves they share with me, and it's absolutely theirs to give. I was actually in a very interesting situation like that last weekend where I was... So Jack Drummer, did you ever...
No, you mentioned him already a couple times.
Yeah.
Jack Drummer.
Painter, Buffalo-born, went away for a long time, came back, a fixture at the Essex Street pub. So a lot of people knew him as this sort of barfly guy, kind of a Bukowskian figure, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, heavy drinker, barfly guy, but at the same time, he's this very prolific artist making remarkable work that I think you might really like.
Yeah.
On rubber, yeah. Kind of Rothko-y in certain ways. So anyway, there was a big retrospective. He just died a couple of years ago, a big retrospective at Burchfield.
And BT&C Gallery, and it's still up at BT&C Gallery over on Niagara Street in the city. But he also was friends with the guys down at Silo City, the guys who own the property down there. And when he was still alive, he said that he would
This guy's dead?
Yeah, Jack is dead. These other guys that...
But they have his work up at okay, all right.
Yeah. And it just came down actually 2 days
Burchfield
ago.
just did a huge show of his stuff. I mean, it's giant stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Massive stretched rubber works with like emulsion and in rust incorporated intentionally in this industrial building he was living in. Yeah, his work.
But he's deceased.
He's deceased.
Okay, all right.
You can still like his work.
Okay.
What I've come to learn. So essentially, this past weekend, for this pop-up show of his work down at the Silos.
Yeah.
His
Did he do
family.
this just before he died? He said, "Here, I'm giving this to you. Put it up."
No, he was friends with the guys who run the Silos, and he said, "I would want a show here."
Okay.
Oh, and so they, at the end of the Burchfield show, they put together a small exhibition down there just in some of the silos.
Okay.
And so for this show, most importantly, down at the silos, his estranged family came together from all over the country. So to put things together in context, he grew up in Buffalo, moved to New York in the late 50s, early 60s, was in the Young American show at the Whitney with a number of other really influential artists at the time, and essentially really shown in those exhibitions at the Whitney. And, anecdotally, he said something along the lines of, well, if it's that easy to win New York, I'm out. And just left.
Yeah, like at an early age, he could have easily become, because he was getting there's this glowing review in the New York Times, and he just walked away from all of that.
All of it.
The stuff that many artists, would dream of doing.
Right. I went to Hawaii and lived on the beach for 2 years, and had a studio and a cannery and just made sculptures out of the discarded bits from the surfboard shop up the street, or whatever, and lived there for maybe another 12, 15 years, and then came back to Buffalo and bought a house on Connecticut Street and drank his days away at Essex Street Pub. But every morning between like 5 a.m. and 10 a.m., he was making art in this unheated, brick building. So anyway, so that's Jack Drummer, right? That's Jack Drummer as a concept at this point in some ways. But...
Oh, I wanted to ask you, when his estranged family came?
Yeah.
Were they warm to the idea of, gee, we wish we knew him better? Or?
Some of them knew him. Some of them knew him.
Yeah, some of the kids, I think they didn't know their father at all, from what I hear.
Well, yeah, but they knew he was their father.
Yeah.
Like there was, they knew that their father was more interested in being Hawaii than raising them. And they certainly did not have it easy because of that in very, very, very significant ways. So really what I'm doing is I was interjecting myself in this very tense, emotional family dynamic of all these different parts of a family coming together.
You could feel the tension.
Oh, God, yes. And so I'm just the naive thing going in there with an audio recorder and saying, tell me about your estranged father, Jack Drummer, who you haven't seen since you were 6 years old.
And you're in your, 30s now or something? Yeah.
Right, 40s.
40s. Wow.
A lot of them. And so one of his daughters did sit down with me as we were looking at the paintings, and she said, I'm so great. She said something along the lines of being grateful for this opportunity because his art was the only part of her father that she liked. Everything else about him was tortured, and torturous for her and her existence, And so I'm trying to go into this, but also these are people's lived lives. It's not an audio, what they're sharing with me is not an audio clip to them. It's the story of being in foster care, and so who am I to demand anything of them other than whatever it is that they freely want to share about this very complicated person that they had this very complicated and very scarring relationship with. And so, but I did want to be there. I made myself very available all weekend. I kind of showed up at the museum when they were there and just let them know I was present if they wanted to talk. And his daughter did respond to what she called my energy and how I was both patient and there, but also not there when I could really tell that I should not be anywhere near them, with a recorder. I mean, it's, So it was very interesting. It was a very delicate thing to navigate. And I was also glad when I finally could step away and say, okay, that's all I want. These little tiny snippets, that's fine. That's all I get and that's all I need. And good luck in your life, in so many ways. And just back away. It was been an interesting week of interviews. I'm sorry if I seem a little in some ways, this is one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever done. But it is also, I'm not used to being such an active participant in the interview. I have the questions that I normally ask, and then the conversation can go many places, but often around very concrete, structured conversations. And I'm not used to seeing myself, on television in that way.
Yeah, because Richard's kind of interviewing you at the same time you're interviewing him.
And it's also meandering. It's meandering in this way that I'm so grateful that you're here, because there's an analysis and a history that you have that in some ways I am still very oblivious to, And so
that's those. You're very welcome. It's those unknown unknowns in a way, because I know these chunks of Richard's life, or at least that they exist, that you don't even know to ask questions about. But I also don't want to impose an order.
Oh my gosh!
This is the thing.
This is wonderful.
I'd like to expand on the concept of privacy, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know we're in the dance section now.
Yeah.
I know people in the religious community, based on my experience of being in the seminary. Somebody came to me and said that he knows a deacon. Now, as you know, with the priesthood getting smaller and smaller and smaller, for churches to exist now, they have to take people out of the lay community and say, would you be the assistant or helping the priest, etc. I have a friend who does a radio show here. He's a priest assistant. He actually goes to, when the priest can't make it to the hospitals to visit people, he sends my friend, and he has to go visit them, and he says, here, take the communion wafers. If they're all blessed. If anybody wants communion, you give it to them.
Pre-blessed. Wow.
And he says sometimes he goes to people and they go, I'm not worthy. I cannot take communion. I'm not worthy. He's got to think of something to say. What do you say if somebody says I'm not worthy? But okay, so this particular fellow, he said, you know, I have a friend who's a deacon, and when the elderly pastor died in his sleep, he found him in bed. You know, time to get up, you know, we got to do something. Oh, you're dead. So calls up the ambulance and says, you know, what's the procedure? And they tell him, well, it involves us. We declare him dead, or et cetera, and he's got to go to a funeral home. Okay. So he makes all the arrangements, right? Then he says, I don't think his bed, you know, where he died, I think it should be like new sheets or something. You can't, he just didn't feel right about the impression on the bed, you know, like that's where I found him. I'm going to make up the bed. So when he goes to make up the bed and, you know, you lift it up, you take off the old sheets, he finds a stack of porno magazines under the bed, under the mattress. Porno magazines, you know, that's a rather generic term. We're talking bondage. You know, we're talking some pretty heavy stuff here.
Is it over 18?
What?
Were the people pictured adults?
Yes.
Okay, then
yes.
great.
Okay.
Yeah, then that's fine.
So now comes the funeral of the priest. And the person who found the body, he's got to get up and say something. You know how people say things at funerals? So I said to my friend, did he mention the porno magazines? And my friend says, absolutely not. He goes, and I don't blame him one bit. And I said, wow, you and I think differently. Because I would have put that the very first thing when I got up. I would have said to all the people at the wake or whatever the ceremony is, I would have said, and you know, I found this stack of porno magazines when I was making the bed, you know, bondage, etc., heavy stuff. I guess he was human, just like the rest of us. And I would have sent a message to every other priest in that audience. Look, if you're doing it, you're not alone. You know, this happens to everybody. Homo sum nihil humani. Right?
My alarm's going off.
Her alarm?
You know what?
Let's wait till she gets back.
All right. You can sit quietly.
Sure.
I could sit in silence.
Or you could whisper things to me that you don't want anybody else to hear.
Yeah, you could write down the Janet story.
Yes, I could.
Alarm is over.
You mean you got to go?
No, oh no. No.
How are we on time? It's 9:17 to use a Richard time. But
Yeah.
Who are you asking, her or me?
both. We was all of us.
I usually go to bed at 3 a.m., so.
Yeah. I got to get ready for Toronto tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the Richard Wicka story could go on forever and ever.
For many times. Well, there could also be many visits.
True.
I mean.
Oh, that would be great. I'd love
Yeah.
to do this again.
Yeah. When you're in a better place post Canada.
Yeah.
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 So homo sum nihil humani means I'm human just like that person. That's what it means. And that person could be anybody.
But I think there are many ways in which we can deconstruct the power structures that create the illusion of inequality, if not in practice, in concept. But I think it's something that people can consent to, and I think it's something that people will buy in more to, you know, and want to participate in if they feel that they have the choice in participating.
Well, let me ask you this: if you were giving the eulogy, would you have mentioned the porno magazines?
No, but if I was drinking later that night, talking with people about him, I would have.
And why wouldn't you have mentioned the porno magazines in the eulogy? He's deceased.
He's deceased.
You're
but
not
there are-
outing him.
Well, no, you are outing him. He just happens to be dead. I mean, actually, I don't mean to get incredibly relevant right now with the Orlando shooting and all that sort of thing, but there are people who were outed to their families when their families got the call that they're
Dead.
You know, and so they were outed because and that's a very different situation, and absolutely, like, it's a very different thing, but there are things that people throughout their lives want to hold private and then don't want, after they're dead, to change the way other people may view them. I mean, Charles Burchfield, who I consider to be one of my best friends, who's been dead since long before I was born, certainly was a very private person, and really what we see the evidence of that in his journals is, like, he did rip out pages from his journals. 10,000 pages of journals. You know, he left us so much. He left us so much that we can recreate weather patterns from places based on his sketches. You know, he left us so much information and so much intimate thought and care.